And welcome to the Gay Liberation Network here on Chicago Access Network Television. I'm Andy Thayer, and with me tonight is Andrea Crain, who has been working very diligently on securing equal marriage rights here in Illinois. And we'll be talking about the local situation a little bit, but the main thing right now is we're going to be discussing the recent Supreme Court decisions, that's the U.S. Supreme Court decisions on marriage rights that came down at the end of June, specifically the striking down of what's known as Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act, and that basically denied same-sex couples in the states where marriage is legal for us the right to access federal benefits, and so that was an important gain. And we also are going to be discussing the court's decision to throw the issue of the so-called Proposition 8 of California back to a lower court, which in effect has allowed for equal marriage rights in California. But we're still at a state here now where the vast majority of states, some 37 of us, including Illinois, lack marriage rights. Andrea, what did you think? What were your first impressions about the U.S. Supreme Court decisions when they came down on I believe it was June 26th?
I was pretty excited because we got a bit of a victory, but obviously it wasn't the full victory that a lot of people wanted, and that the Proposition 8, anti-Proposition 8 people wanted when they originally brought their case. They wanted sweeping rulings such as Loving versus Virginia, where marriage equality would become the law throughout the land, and obviously that's the only fair solution to the situation. But it certainly does provide a lot of amazing benefits for people who did get married in the 13 states and DC where it's legal. So.
Yeah, and according to the General Accounting Office, some 1,300 plus benefits, which is what the plaintiff had sued in regarding the Defense of Marriage Act, which was passed in 1996 by President Clinton. Now, the people are going to be able to access those rights, and very important ones in terms of whether or not, if a spouse dies, if the other spouse is potentially going to become homeless because she or he can't access the assets of their former loved one. And I personally know people here in Chicago who have been made homeless as a result of that happening, where straight relatives who were legally closer to the deceased than surviving partner were able to literally steal the assets and make people homeless as a result. So a very important gain on that respect, but what do you think about those left out in the cold?
Well, obviously that's not an acceptable solution, and we have to make sure that all the states pass marriage equality, as many as we can get. Eventually, I'm sure there'll be a sweeping Supreme Court ruling. But the people in Illinois still don't have all those benefits. As soon as the DOMA ruling came down, like within half an hour, people started getting that applied to their cases. In New York, there was a man who was going to be deported. He was having a deportation hearing that exact morning, and his lawyer ran down with the ruling on DOMA, and the judge in that case agreed that he should be allowed some more time to get a green card now that it's possible.
Right.
And he was legally married. Now, we in Illinois are not legally married, so we can't access that unless we go out of state to get married. And
then even then, it's an open question whether or not. And the court essentially made for a mess in some respects. If they just simply said, this group of people are entitled to legal equality, and certainly there are aspects of the Constitution that would certainly indicate that you can't discriminate against a whole group of people, and yet the court refused to do that. And even the victory over Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act was only a 5-4 vote, which was very narrow.
It's disappointing.
Yeah.
It is. But, I mean, I guess at this point, it is a very gray area, and some agencies and some areas of the government are going to recognize marriage based on where you had the marriage performed, and others based on where your residence is. So and one striking case is the Department of Defense is going to recognize your marriage based on where it was performed, whereas the Veterans Administration is planning on recognizing it only based on where you reside. So if you were married and you're in the Army, right now the Army will recognize your marriage, but when you get out of the Army, the Veterans Administration won't.
Yeah.
It's really a ridiculous situation.
Well, and part of it was the disturbing way, in my view, how the decision came down. It was essentially, in essence, privileging states' rights over civil rights. And what this means is that people growing up in, say, Mississippi or any of the other Bible Belt states, in essence, are being told that their rights are trumped by so-called states' rights. And the African American civil rights movement back in the day rightly rejected this right across the board. Every significant figure said that if states' rights are privileged over African American rights, then we're going to have a situation where people in Mississippi and whatever will never be able to vote or what have you. The other thing that I think was very disturbing about the finding of no standing, as the court put it, to the proposition, the pro-discrimination plaintiffs, was they essentially said that a sitting governor and his or her attorney general can overthrow a popular referendum simply because the people who brought the suit don't have standing. And while I don't think anyone's civil rights should ever be put up to a vote, the problem with that is that, say, if you had a great anti-corporate referenda passed in California, the governor and the attorney general could say, we're in bed with the corporations, therefore let that be nullified. It's a very dangerous precedent, I think, in that respect.
That's true. It would have been a lot better if they had gone ahead and looked at the merits of it and realized that they needed to, apply the Constitution and say these people should be allowed to be married because they have equal protection and due process. And
that's the whole thing, the equal protection clause of the Constitution. We do have a caller on, so let's take a question here if our call screener's ready to. Okay, caller, you're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
My question was, and thank you for taking this call. My question was, what is it if the lady that brought the suit in California that brought about these new changes in the law, if she, since she's a widow, if she applies for Social Security federal benefits as a survivor, what happens?
Well,
do anybody have any idea what will happen? Say if she filed today for survivor benefits.
Well, if the court's ruling is to be believed, she actually is from New York City, and if the court's decisions are actually implemented, then she will be able to access all federal benefits, because that was the whole purpose of her suit. She was married, actually, I believe it was in Canada, but then New York State recognized same-sex marriages, and so she should have been, she should be able to access those benefits. The problem is anyone who's studied the history of court decisions, the big one being the Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas in 1954, which said we were supposed to get desegregation in the schools and by implication every place else. It really wasn't until the civil rights movement got a head of steam together by the early 1960s and forced that change that we actually had implementation, at least to an extent, of what the court had said should have happened as night follows day. And so we can't be complacent about these rights that supposedly should be coming to those people in 13 states. We do have another caller, and we'll try and squeeze in this caller right now. Yes, go ahead, caller. You're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I wanted to know why civil unions were not part of the government law, just only marriages. Why didn't they include civil unions? Because what Illinois did, they didn't do marriage, but they let civil unions happen for the exact same reasons for two of the same sex to get married. So, in my opinion, a civil union is a gay marriage. I don't know why they wouldn't allow the government employees to get the same benefits for a civil union that you have to be married.
Well, the Office of Personnel Management made that decision that the civil unions and domestic partnerships aren't the same, and we know they're not the same because they were instituted specifically so that they wouldn't have to give same-sex marriage to people in states like Illinois, because they were just a little bit too scared to.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, an example of political cowardice on the part of our Illinois legislators and the legislators in other states, such as New Jersey and so forth, that rather than giving people true legal equality in every respect, they said, well, let's call it something different, and we promise it'll have the same rights. And in practice, people have found that isn't true. But it was really political cowardice on the part of our state legislators, like here in Illinois. And it flies in the face of history, where we've learned, if nothing else, that separate but equal is never truly equal. And really the purpose of separate but equal, I think, is to cast aspersion upon a whole group of people. I mean, and in that respect, this whole battle over marriage is about something, I think, much more fundamental than marriage itself. As important as marriage rights are to many individual couples, it really is about whether or not the government, whether or not society is going to treat lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people as the other. I mean, in the same respect, when thinking back to the African American civil rights movement of the 1960s, when people protested against separate but equal drinking fountains, was it really about drinking fountains, or was it about using these petty insults to basically cast an entire community as the other, and in essence opening up not just for far more serious discrimination but violence? I mean, we just had an incident in this morning's Tribune talking about a horrible attack on a lesbian couple on the far west side, and basically that kind of violence is encouraged when our government says that one group of people is not truly equal. We do have another caller on, but we're going to first get to a few quick announcements. Again, you're watching the Gay Liberation Network here on CAN TV, and the GLN is a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered direct action group. Please check out our website at www.gayliberation.net to find out more about what we're about. And we have some exciting events coming up here. In fact, Andrea and I have been working very hard, along with many, many others, about this important event tomorrow, a March on Chicago for Marriage Equality, 1 p.m. tomorrow at the intersection of Michigan and Congress. We're going to be a short rally there that Andrea said has been working very, very diligently on, and then we'll have a march. So please come out for that rally tomorrow. We'll get that information up on the screen a little bit again. But this is all preparatory to a very important march happening in Springfield that's going to be happening at the start of the next legislative session, actually the fall veto session, on Tuesday, October 22nd. There's going to be a mass march on Springfield, Illinois. There'll be transportation from all over the state, people converging on on Springfield, I should say, to demand that our legislature pass equal marriage rights, specifically the House of Representatives, the Democratic-dominated House of Representatives that has failed to do so. And you're going to be seeing this logo, I'm sure, much more over the next few months. Talking about marches, I just wanted to quickly show a few pics of another march that happened on Friday, July 5th, down in Kankakee, Illinois. This is a part of a series of events that are happening around the state in preparation for this big march on Springfield on Tuesday, October 22nd. And if you go to our website, www.gayliberation.net, you can get more information about that. We'll get you all hooked up. Anyway, and just keep those pics going up there. Andrea, could you tell us a little bit about tomorrow's march in Chicago, why people should attend?
It's going to be amazing because we are going to be right outside the Taste of Chicago with all those people streaming by. We're going to be marching up past Millennium Park, and we need to make sure that the general public, and not just the activists who are always involved, call their representatives, come on down to Springfield with us, and really show that the state is behind this. It's a very popular idea to make us equal, even though it shouldn't have to be popular for it to happen because it's our right. We just need to bring all those people together to show everyone that the state wants this.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for those who might doubt that this is indeed a popular item, the Crain Chicago Business back in February had a poll that showed that Illinoisans favor marriage equality versus our opponents by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. So this measure that we're demanding that Mike Madigan, as Speaker of the House, get his Democratic majority in that body to pass, it's not like we're asking him to do some sort of financial flim-flam or other unsavory, unpopular item. This is something that Illinoisans are demanding, and he should respect that. But we do have another caller. Caller, you're on CAN TV. What's your question or comment, please?
Hi, I'm Kira. Thank you guys for speaking up the rally tomorrow. I will be attending.
Excellent.
Thank you.
My question was more so about the court decisions that just happened on DOMA as well as Proposition 8. Do you think the government is more so leaving it open, an open state decision, to more so encourage the bans to come through and the lawsuits to come through to challenge these? Like I just heard North Carolina, the Attorney General there, he's not standing up for his state's amendment. That was just, it just happened now. He's not standing up, and the Pennsylvania Attorney General is not standing up. So do you think that was sort of what the government wants us to do, is challenge these bans and show that it's not constitutional?
I personally think that the Supreme Court, that portion of the government anyway, took a very cowardly approach, that they didn't want to be saddled with making what should be a fundamental human rights decision themselves, and so they basically punted back to the states. And so while places like Pennsylvania or New Jersey, where equal marriage rights is very popular, and the polls show over and over again for the last few years that people are on our side, and places like Mississippi or Alabama or other the so-called Bible Belt states, conversely, those states, if we're forced to go the legislative road in those states, it's going to be nearly impossible. I mean, talking about in Mississippi, it was not too many years ago that they finally got around to outlawing slavery. So I think it really was cowardice on the part of the Supreme Court. And people on our side cannot be complacent that just because we won these victories, just because we've got 13 states on our side right now, that we're going to automatically win marriage equality. I mean, all the polls show that most Americans now think that we will get equal marriage rights, but it would be foolish to be that complacent, I think.
Definitely, Andy. I mean, I think complacency is one of the main things holding us back from getting a lot of people behind, the important things we need to do to make this happen in our state and across the country, because people think it's just going to happen. I mean, at some point we will be equal, but whether it takes 10 years or 20 years or whether it happens this year in Illinois is up to us. We have to work for it. So as to the Supreme Court, I believe they did leave some promising language in there that can be used in future lawsuits if those are brought, but they punted. They definitely didn't want to make a bold decision yet, and I think that was very, very unfortunate.
It means that people that we know, a couple here that's one of the plaintiffs here in Illinois that have been together now 50 years, they may not have too many years together, and they'll have to wait. There's people, I mean, as Dr. King said, justice deferred is justice denied, and certainly for a couple that's been waiting 50 years, that's doubly true. The other danger is that right now, while the momentum's going in the favor of equal rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, there's nothing to say that if we hit a severe economic crisis or a war or something, that our whole movement couldn't be diverted and sidetracked. I mean, certainly that has been the experience with other movements. The suffragists movement made all sorts of gains during the 1920s, but then the Great Depression hit, and that was it. The same could be said of LGBT rights, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. Our first big movement in history was in 1930s Germany, I should say 1920s Germany. The Great Depression hit, and then the rise of Nazism hit, and that totally kiboshed our movement. So it's important not to be complacent. And the problem was that we had so many of our leaders in the run-ups to the end of the legislative session on May 31st who thought, oh, it's going to happen automatically, that the antis were able to out-mobilize us in rally after rally, and that sent a horrible message to the legislature.
Yes, it did. And, our own leadership was sending that message, that we didn't need to really worry about it too much. And obviously that wasn't the case. So we need to work on it.
Well, it should be very basic that the history of civil rights progress has always been that no matter how just, how righteous, how logical the cause is, the people most affected have to be out in the streets in order to demand those rights. But I would also say to the LGBT community, it's important for us to be out in defense of other people's rights, because the reason why we have not gotten oftentimes the kind of solidarity that we need is not enough of our LGBT organizations are out there in defense of immigration rights, are not there out in protesting against police brutality or any number of other injustices. And so when it comes time for our community to need the solidarity of non-LGBTs, people say, where have you been? And with good reason. The Gay Liberation Network, I'm very proud to say, has had an approach of supporting all justice struggles to the extent that we can, but that is the exception and not the rule in the LGBT community. And I think we need to get back to our roots immediately following Stonewall, the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969, when LGBT groups were campaigning against war, they were campaigning against police brutality, against attacks on the Black Panther Party, and so forth. And so when we needed support as LGBTs, people were there for us. And so that's the message that we need to take forward. We are getting close to the end of our show here, so I did want to just bring up a few more announcements here that people can watch. Again, tomorrow, the Marriage Equality Rally, downtown Chicago. All the information is coming up on your screen there. 1 p.m. tomorrow, Michigan Avenue and Congress. It's going to be an exciting march following an opening rally. And then, of course, we've got the march on Springfield that people got to keep in touch about. Again, that's Tuesday, October 22nd, and we'll be definitely mobilizing transportation for that. And if you want to find out more about the Gay Liberation Network, you can attend our next meeting, which is the first Wednesday of each month at the Burger Park Cultural Center, corner of Granville and Sheridan Road, 7 p.m., first Wednesday of each month. And our next show on CAN TV, we're typically the second Friday evening of each month, and so our next one will be Friday, August 9th. Please tune in, same channel, same time for that. And finally, we'd like to thank the people who made this show possible.